name, and the name of the show is what again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're doing it right now. Here we go. You're going to say the Break It Down Show.
Break It Down Show.
Yeah. So go ahead. We just started. So go ahead and say it.
Okay. I am Noopy Rodrigues. I am Rose Marie's daughter, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show, or watching, whichever.
Yeah, and it's Friday, and there's an echo, so I'm going to put Noopy on mute whenever I'm talking, hopefully to make the echo be reduced, because this is the world we live in, and we have no idea why there's an echo. But what I am going to tell you is I love Rosemary, and I love that we get to do these things. It's dumb that technology makes this stupid echo thing happen, but what a treat. And all of these things are going on, Noopy, that are 100 years of LA. My grandfather on my father's side was born about a year before your mom. And all of these things are about 100 years old, and we're celebrating LA and all of these things. So thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for celebrating this. What a neat thing, and what a neat life you've had to live. Go ahead.
Oh, well, okay. We're celebrating my mother's 100th birthday, and in decided to release a CD of her recordings. She has a 90-year career in show business. She started when she was 3. She had her own radio show on NBC when she was 5. She basically went through everything in show business that there was: radio, vaudeville, nightclubs, movies, TV, everything. So there's really no other performer that actually did that. And her fans, believe it or not, when she was alive, she had 35,000 fans on Facebook. Now that she's passed away, she has 65,000 fans on Facebook. And she has a very, very loyal fan group. And every time she sang on the Dick Van Dyke Show, the fans loved to hear her sing. So we decided we had tons of recordings. There's a wonderful documentary out about her called Wait for Your Laugh. And in researching that, she saved everything. It took me 3 years to clean out her house. It's unbelievable. She saved everything. We had 65 scrapbooks, recordings, CDs, reel to reels, 16mm films, everything. So just that you watch it. It's available on Amazon Prime for nothing. You can watch it, and it's a basic history of show business. It really is. And because she sang in nightclubs, she opened Las Vegas. That's a whole separate story. And she is a really good singer. And so there's 29 tracks on this CD. It's called Rose Marie Sings. It's a marvelous collection of songs that she sang, some of which are kind of funny, some of which she wrote actually from her Italian background, kind of novelty type Italian songs, which were very popular at the time in the genre of Come On to My House. And I had never heard half of these cuts, to be honest. I really hadn't. And listening to them, she's just absolutely terrific singer. And so we basically decided for her 100th birthday that we were going to release these 29 tracks that we have had and give her fans what they wanted. And her fans really asked us for this. Some of her fans have already gotten it and have just made comments about how wonderful it is. There's one woman that plays it all day long in her house. And it's a tribute to an era of good singing and Basically, we felt that the fans wanted it, so we basically gave it to the fans.
Let me ask a question here. I wanted, your mom has done so much stuff. She started so early as a child star. We always hear the horror stories of all of that. How did your mom get through that time? And then, by the way, going through, I got the chance to go through my grandfather's stuff. He's had a bunch of things. He was born in California and came up in Inglewood, right? And so you have all these things, and he was a very successful athlete. And so there was all these things, and you're reading all this stuff, and you learn so much that really, if no one sat down and went through all of these small moments in their life, like sure, the big things are out there, but there must have been a treasure trove of these small Rosemary moments where you're like, look at that. Like my mom just jumped back to life as a 15-year-old, as a 20-year-old. You must have had a million of these things. Because I'll tell you one little quick story about my grandfather, Don, was I was going through online archives of yearbooks from Inglewood High, right? This is not his yearbook. And I'm flipping through, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, Doris, you're a great gal, signed Don Norton, right? And I'm like, holy cow, 15-year-old Don Norton just came to life. No one would ever care about this except for the fact that I saw it, I knew who he was, and there was relevance from this thing from 1938. You must have a bunch of stories about that. So talk about her being a child star and her evolution out of that. And then talk about those hidden moments that would only be important to you that really brought your not your mom, but Rosemary, the girl, the gal, the young lady to life.
Well, when she had nothing bad to say about her childhood as far as being on the stage and all that. She always enjoyed performing. Her father was her manager, so he basically took charge. She and her father, kind of had some problems later on in life because she was the main person to feed the family at that time. So anything that she made at that time, her father took. But she never said anything bad. And when you're doing vaudeville, you're doing 8, 9, 12 shows a day. At one point, the child labor law got involved, and her father got arrested, I think, over 130 times because she was a child star and she was up there singing. So they threw the child labor law at her. But he would go in, they'd bail him out, and out he'd come, and it basically went on from there. She loved performing until the day she passed. It was almost like a drug to her. She had to do it. And she never really complained about it because she really loved it. The transition from her being a child star when she started to grow, because she wasn't a baby anymore. So she developed a nightclub act and was playing nightclubs. And then instead of becoming baby Rosemary, she became Miss Rosemary and started to play nightclubs. Of course, when she was a child star, she was involved with the mob got involved. And there's a whole thing in her documentary about the mob. Because you couldn't work Vegas without working for the mob. I mean, it was impossible. And she literally opened up the Flamingo Hotel with Bugsy Siegel. So when you think about her career and you think about what she's done, she really didn't have anything bad to say about it because she just kept evolving. She kept child star, nightclubs, and then it got to the point where she said, I guess. And then when that kind of faded out, she did Four Girls Four. So she was back on stage with Margaret Whiting, Helen O'Connell, her, and Rosemary Clooney. So she literally evolved and never stopped. The only time she stopped was when my father passed away. They had a wonderful marriage. My father was a wonderful musician, very well renowned in this town. And he got a very weird blood disease that they still to this day, they don't know what it was. They think maybe something in the army or something, but it was very strange. And they sent samples of his blood all over the world trying to figure out what the heck it was. But when he passed away, that was the time that she backed off. It was the first time that she had ever backed off. But because of the show, the show business group, they all rallied and they said, come on, you got to get out. You got to get out. You got to get out. Dean Martin, all of them got her out. And then, of course, Hollywood Squares came up. So then she became the game show person. And she said, well, I think I can do that because I don't have to perform. So she went ahead and did 16 years of Hollywood Squares, if you can believe that. So amazing career. So many people didn't realize what a good voice she had, which is why we decided to put out this CD. I was blown away by certain cuts on it that I had never heard before. And what a great singer she was. And if you talk about, not to say the music today, I find myself saying that the singers today feel that they have to scream. And the audience goes crazy and everybody loves, and they scream and all that stuff. But there's something about a singer that having a tone and a feeling for the lyrics that I'm sad to say I don't see anymore.
Did your mom sing around the house?
No. She was a mother and a wife around the house. The only time she sang in the house was if she had to rehearse something that was new, a new song. She couldn't read music, but she could hear it and she could sing it. So she would have her piano player come over and she would go over if she wanted a particular song or she would sing then. But no, she was not one of these that walked around singing around the house. She was raised in a strict family. She was a cook. Dinner time, people used to ask me, is your mother as funny at home as she is on TV? And I'd say, yeah, I laugh all day long. But she was a mother. She was a wife. She adored my father. My father adored her. We had a sit-down dinner, and it was every night. And if my grandparents were there, it was family sit down. My grandmother used to cook for days. Italian families, you just do nothing but eat, forever. And a lot of parties that they had, a lot of things like that came through my father. Then when she started to do television, then television stars would come over. But I was a kid. I was never, she would get mad at me. Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz came over one day and did a scene from the Long Trailer in our living room. And I said, well, okay, that's fun, but I'm going to go do my homework. My mother got so mad at me. She goes, you just had Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz here. I said, okay. So I was never starstruck. Only one person had me starstruck, and that was Frank Sinatra. That he's the only one that I couldn't talk. It was like crazy, but they were her friends. They were my parents' friends. They were. It's a weird thing, and I was just reading a story about a child of a celebrity a couple of days ago that's in a lot of trouble and whatever, drugs and in and out of rehab and all this stuff. And I never did that. I had horses. I loved horses. I showed horses. You didn't do that stuff around the horse people. You were who you were. And really, they didn't care who your parents were. If you screwed up in the show ring, you screwed up in the show ring. And it's like, oh, well, who cares? And I think that was a big part of me and who I am today. Because there's so many kids, like I said, I just read a couple of days ago. And this is a child of a very well-known person and in and out of rehab over the years and drugs and this and that. And boy, I never did contribute to the way I was raised and being strict. And I thank them for that because it makes me the person that I am now, really.
I want to ask about looking through my grandfather's stuff. One of the things I realized was that when he was a star athlete at Inglewood High, his high school would play, while she was there, Betty White's high school, right? And so you have these funny connections. Or I did a show recently with one of Harlan's, like Harlan's this, everybody knows Harlan. Harlan's this PR person. You know Harlan. I know Harlan. But just up the hill from this one client of his house is Doris Day's house, right? Like all these people, they all knew each other. They all drove around. And it's funny because you can end up at so-and-so's house. The house I was at that I'm talking about used to be Dean Martin's house. So all of these people all knew each other, right? And I'm not saying that my grandfather knew Betty White, but they were for sure in the same gym in the same high school at the same time. And whether Betty White was there cheering for a basketball team or whatever it was, there just weren't that many kids. And so everybody kind of had a job. Either you were a cheerleader or you were showing up to cheer or hang out or something. It's such a small world. And then you add in something small like the Hollywood Squares family or whatever. We've had John Davidson on this show, right? This is a small world. It's a really small world. So talk a little bit about, okay, look, Frank Sinatra, Starstruck, that kind of thing. But yeah, you go over to Betty White's house and you hang out over there, or you go to so-and-so's house for a party, and it just doesn't impact you. But so many other kids, it does impact. So many people's lives revolve around getting on a bus tour and driving around the hills. Talk a little bit about that experience because you really lived it. But for you, it was just regular life.
Yeah, it really was. Betty and Alan Ludden were very good friends of ours. Over at the house a lot. In those days, they used to have a lot of dinner parties. I don't know if they do that nowadays, but it was a lot of dinner parties. And of course, my mother loving to cook and my grandmother, if she was there. And I would walk out of my room and I would see these people on the floor writhing because they had eaten so much, Steve Allen and Jane Meadows one night came over and Steve Allen wouldn't leave the piano. He sat there and played all night long until finally they said, "Hey, we're going to eat. Get off the piano, get off." And it was, the dinner parties were terrific. Betty, I adored. She was as honest as the day is long. There was no baloney about her. There's so many celebrities that are put on an act, an air, whatever. Betty was straight ahead. Betty and Alan did a show called Pet Set, which was had pets, and my mother and I did one with her, with my cat and my mother's dog. And then you've got horses, so why don't you become my horse person? So I said, okay. So Betty came out to the barn. She rode one of my horses. I did her show a couple of times. She even remarked about the fact that I had brought 3 horses on stage for Pet Set. And she even remarked about that in her book, because one was a stud. And she said it was like amazing to have the stud, the mother, and the baby all on the same stage. And I love Betty. She was honest as the day is long. And she was at the house a few times with Alan Ludden at the time. And it was a great time, because you don't want to say the expression, it's not a gang, it's a club. And it really was a club of people that cared about each other. When they're at a house or they're at a dinner party, look at who, And so that was what I saw. That was what I lived, was that I saw these people. And when I started to work on my own and I became a producer, I was originally hired because they said, we hired you because we knew you wouldn't get starstruck. And I said, okay. That was why I was hired to be a segment producer at NBC. And I liked working behind the camera, because I said, who the heck can compete with what's in front? So I actually enjoyed it. But I was told originally, my first job, he said, I hired you because I knew that I could bring on any celebrity and it wouldn't dazzle you. You wouldn't be one of these kids that would just flip out. And I didn't. What is the old line? They all put their pants on the same way. That's just how it was. And like I said, there was only one person that did it for me, but the rest of them, they were human beings. They were fun. Had great parties, a lot of laughs, and it was a great time to grow up. I had my horses. I was happy, and that was it. I mean, there's really nothing bad about it. And after my father died, it was very hard for my mother to come back, extremely hard. And people like Dean Martin that called her up and said, I want you to do my show. And she said, I don't think I can. She was in a very deep depression. She had 1 year left on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and she didn't want to do it. Director, and was up with her all night long. Literally. I mean, I went to bed and I got up in the morning, he was still there. And he talked her into, he says, you got to do the 1 year. And so she did. And she said, it's hard for me to be funny. But she went ahead and did it. She was a pro. She always was. But she didn't go into her bedroom for almost a year. That's how bad it was. Mm-hmm. And she got a call from Dean Martin, and he said, I want you to do my show and I want you to sing. She said, Dean, I can't do it. I can't do it. He said, yes, you can. I'm stuck. I need to get, whatever the heck he said. And he said, you can sing whatever song you want to sing. And she said, I just. He wound up convincing her to come on. He said, I'll sit right there with you, which is exactly what he did. And she picked the song Little Girl Blue, which is on the CD. And if you listen to her sing that, it will rip your heart apart. If you have any kind of knowledge about what she was going through. And he literally sat next to her, was the only way she could sing it. And he sat next to her and had his hand on her while she sang the song. And that cut is on the CD. Because when I heard it, I hadn't heard it for a long time, and I heard it, and I just sat here and tears just streamed down my face. And she sings it, you know it's coming from the heart, and you know. And singers at that time, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, the singers today, they don't respect the lyrics. The lyrics are so good. And singers that were true singers. And every time I watched him perform, he always sang one for my baby. And he called it a saloon song. Well, on this CD, I'm looking at the list and it says one for my baby. What the heck? Now, this is 1950. How many women do you know that would sing in 1950? It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. So set 'em up, Joe. Not too many. And I said, she sang that in the 50s. And she sings the heck out of it. I'm telling you. And the one good thing that my parents gave me was a good ear. And if somebody goes off key, trust me, I know it. Trust me. It's like somebody sticking a spike in my back. And my parents used to always say, thank God she has a good ear. But that's also on the CD. So there are very easy to listen to. There's 2 cuts on there. They called her in. One of her favorite shows was Gypsy. And one of her best friends was Ethel Merman. She saw Ethel Merman do Gypsy on Broadway and just thought she was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they became friends. And she always wanted to do Gypsy. And they were going to do the film with Rosalind Russell. And they called her in. The powers that be at the studios thought that they would have to dub Rosalind Russell's voice. And so they brought in my mother to have a little bit of because she had a little bit of a grovelly voice anyway, especially when she was a kid. They thought that, they said no kid sings like that. But they brought her in. She sang 2 songs. She sang 2 cuts from Gypsy. And turns out that they didn't use her, but we have the 2 cuts. We found the 2 cuts that she sang to dub that movie, which is very rare. And those 2 cuts are on there. So there's that nobody has ever heard before. And the fans are now enjoying it and getting it. It's available on Amazon, and it's also available on her website, missrosemarie.com, which all the links are there for whatever. And it's something that we felt we had to do something for her 100th birthday. We just couldn't let it pass. And plus that, she would have loved it. So are you kidding? She would have loved it. I'm sure she's up there going, yeah, just keep on going, So anyway, that's kind of where we're at.
Let me, I'll jump in here and do a little bit of work. So the link for the CD is right down below here. It's also in the comments if you're watching on YouTube or probably on Facebook. You also can get Miss Rosemarie. There's the link for that right down below. And if you guys want to watch the documentary, those are also in the comment links. All that stuff will be in the show notes. You can always get that, or just go to the main website and just go to right there, missrosemarie.com. Super easy, right? That's super easy to do. A couple things I wanted to ask you about, because look, the community, this is her family, right? So Dean Martin's like, hey, you got to get up, you got to get to work, you got to get out there and do that. not right away after, but at some point after, Dean Martin loses his son, right? And he gets waylaid in a similar way. And by most accounts, he never really recovers. Sure, he survives physically, but he's not the same person after that. All of these people have to go through life. I'm middle aged. I'm not super old, but 53. I'll be 54 in January. And people ask me how I'm doing. I'm like, look, I'm middle aged. I got people that are totally messed up. I got people that are doing great. I've got nothing to complain about, and I got all kinds of things to complain about. That's life, right? But your mom is going through all this stuff with all of these people at the same time, and cataclysms, and the 60s and into the early 70s. You look at all of these famous people, boom, 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 just being taken out of population from overindulgence and all kinds of things. Martin Luther King gets assassinated, and just all this stuff is happening during that era. That's got to be a rough thing to deal with. So I want to talk about how she dealt with that. And also, by the way, when you think about the Flamingo, and she is opens that place up, and it is the last vestige of that era of the Strip. On the Strip, it's completely modernized now. Do you feel nostalgic about that at all? So I'm going to get out of your way and let you chat.
Sure. Well, of course, she played Vegas a lot. So I went to Vegas. I was a kid. And not really knowing that it was run by the mob, but the mob loved her from back to when she was a kid. And they took care of her. And if you watch her documentary, even Peter Marshall says they were great. Any entertainer loved to work Vegas because they got treated Peter says, as long as you didn't flirt with their women or do anything, just go in, do your job. He said it was one of the greatest jobs in the world. So every entertainer in the world wanted to play it. And when she would get the call, okay, we want you to play the Sands this week. We want you to play the Sahara this week, Riviera, whatever. You just didn't say no. Because both of my parents were working. My father was working in LA doing a lot of record dates and everything. And at that time, variety shows were very, very big. Milton Berle had a variety show. Bob Hope, all of them had a variety show. George Gobel. My father played on every one of them, because he had a great laugh. And half the time they would mic him because his laugh was so great. But so he was working, so I was home, but then she would go to Vegas, and then lots of times my father and I would drive to Vegas, and we would be there with her. So Vegas was a big part of my life growing up. And to this day, I still have this affinity of Vegas because that's how I was. I once did a show that we were doing a show called America on the Move. And we were talking about all the people that were moving to Vegas. This was, but in talking to the locals there, I would say, one of the questions that I asked him, I said, how do you look at the Strip, now with Mirage and the Volcano and the Wynn and, Luxor, da. And the guy said, I'll never forget it. The guy said, no, that's our factory. And I thought that was a great line, because that's how they referred to it. Because when they were on the outskirts, they were family, home, whatever. And the guy said, that's my factory. And I looked at that and I said, that's really great. But yeah, to this day, I still like Vegas. When I was a kid, and I would see the slot machines and everything, and I thought that was just so cool as a kid, And the thing I always noticed was the carpet. the carpet was different in the casino as opposed to the carpet that was in the lobby. So I was never allowed to step on the casino carpet as a kid because right on the edge, and my father would go and he'd put a coin in a slot machine so that I could see it. And so consequently now I do gamble. No. It's a really I play, and one time there was a Squares junket. Hollywood Squares used to have junkets to all these various places. And one time it was Vegas. And I went, and my mother taught me blackjack. And she said, what a good mother should teach their child is blackjack. And I loved the game. To this day, I love it, but I don't like if I put like $10 down there, that's like my life is down there. Oh my God, but it's just not the same. I mean, when I was there, we went there one time and Dean Martin was playing there, as a matter of fact. And we went and saw a show, and Dean Martin sang Happy Birthday to Me from the stage. Jimmy Durante was playing there, and we went backstage, and Jimmy Durante had a cake for me. And I or Jimmy Durante, they went back to old vaudeville days. And my mother does a wonderful impression of Jimmy Durante, which is, I believe, is on the CD. And he always said, your mother does the best imitation of me. There's nobody that can even do it better. And Jimmy and his wife were very good friends of our family. Very, very good friends. So, I mean, I grew up in this, but it's hard to explain because you were around all these people, and I go, yeah, but they were people to me. They were entertainers, just like my parents, in the business, and that's what they did. The story of Jerry Lewis is a story that a lot of people don't know about him. First of all, Jerry Lewis adored my father. My father's on every one of the soundtracks of every Jerry Lewis movie. And he's in the orchestra. My father has a tone that I can spot on that particular cut. But when my father started to get ill, she was doing the Dick Van Dyke Show, and he was in some hospital or some small hospital or whatever, and she was upset, and Maury came over to her. There is another one that was like her brother, was Maury Amsterdam. They were so close. And Maury came over, and if it wasn't for her, Maury would not have done the Dick Van Dyke Show. She was the one that called him up and said, get out here. And he said, what's wrong? And she said she was worried about my father and he wasn't getting any better. And Maury said, why don't you call up Jerry Lewis? He said, he knows every doctor in the world out there, from muscular dystrophy and everything else. He said, why don't you call him? She said, okay. So she called him. And Jerry got on the phone and he said, okay. He said, a Dr. Levy's going to call you in 5 minutes. He said, and Dr. Levy was a big mucky muck at Cedars-Sinai. And he said, now, do you need anything? And he said, okay. So Dr. Levy became my father's doctor. Without Dr. Levy, I'm sure he added X amount of months to my father's life, truly. But what a lot of people don't know is that Dr. Levy told us that Jerry called him every day, asked how my father was. And a couple times we went to see him in the hospital, and Jerry Lewis would come in after hours, sit down, crack jokes, make him laugh. Nobody knows this. They all said, oh, he's tough to deal with. He's a pain in the ass. Bah, 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 bah. And we would walk in and my father would say, Jerry was here last night. Oh, okay. And Dr. Levy said, Jerry calls me all the time. All the time. What's happening? What can we do? How can we get him better? What do we need to do? And my mother referred to Jerry, I think in the documentary, as one of her angels. And other people go, oh, he's a pain. He's this, he's that. He's got. A lot of people don't know that about Jerry. And the rally of the entertainment people that rallied to her over this. And this is what I'm sad to say. I don't think that happens nowadays. I really don't, because they were so close. They were a group that cared about each other. And it was like, what can I do to help you? What can I do? Talked to somebody the other day, and they said after Ernie Kovacs died, Frank Sinatra called his widow and said, what do you need? What can I do? They don't advertise this. People like Frank, Dean, Johnny Carson did the same thing that Dean did. Called her up and he said, oh, I had a guest pull out. Can you come on the show? I really need for you to come on the show. Again, she didn't want to do it. He said, no, I'm really stuck, Rosie. You got to help me out. And he got her down there and got her on the show. These are all the things that a lot of people don't realize, those types of people and who they were. You know, they always hear and I saw the good stuff. I really did. It was an amazing group of people that really care about each other. And, it's sad because they aren't here anymore. And although Peter, God bless him, is 97 years old, he's still a part of our family. He's still a part of, and it's an amazing thing to see. And those are stories that people should know that these people did, instead of all the bad stuff. And Jerry Lewis was very influential. Jerry was a brilliant man as far as comedy and comic timing and movies and everything. He was the first one. Did you know that he was the first one to strap a video camera on a movie camera so that he was also directing, so that he could look back and see the way the film shot? That was Jerry Lewis. That's how smart he was. There's a great interview. I think it's on Netflix. The driving coffee with cars or something. Jerry Seinfeld. And it's the last interview that Lewis did. And I have watched that thing twice because Jerry Seinfeld did his homework and Lewis admired that. And that's the one thing. When my mother worked with Doris Day, after Dick Van Dyke, she wound up doing 3 years of Doris Day, and they became really good friends. But the thing that she admired about Doris Day was how professional she was. And she said, they all thought, Rock Hudson, Ditzy, Doris Day, blah, blah, blah. She said, she came home and she said, Doris knows if that director knows what he's doing. She knows where every light is. And my mother loved that about her. If my mother could have gotten starstruck, she was starstruck with Doris Day. She really was. And Doris, until I think 2 days before my mother passed away, they were on the phone with each other, talking like girlfriends. Amazing.
What do you miss about your mom being gone? Like the day-to-day interactions, like the small stuff. What do you miss?
Well, I talk to her every day. Phone calls. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. But I think probably that interaction with her and just things that would come out of her, she was as sharp as a tack to the day she died. She ate her breakfast in the morning, and she called me in the morning and she said, I'm not feeling right. I want you to fix it. And I went, oh, mother, what do you want me to do? And basically her caregiver called me and brought in her lunch, and she said, I can't wake her up. That was it. But she said, but she had her breakfast this morning. She was fine. So, and her memory was uncanny. And when we were doing the documentary and we had all this research. I mean, Jason, who was the producer director, found a film can under her couch one day. I mean, I'm not kidding. And we had 65 scrapbooks. I can't tell you how many cans of film we had. She would say, can I have a copy of that? And the guys would go, yeah, sure. They'd go in, they'd run it off, they'd give it to her. Well, consequently, we opened up a closet, there's film cans. And Jerry Lewis was the same damn way. There was so much stuff that Jerry saved everything. They all do. For some reason, they all save it. And 65 scrapbooks. And we would find something that she would say about a club in Cleveland or whatever. And we'd go to that scrapbook, we'd go to that year, and there was the review of the club and everything was there. That's how keen her memory was. Somebody asked her one time about the Copacabana. She was doing an interview, I think, for PBS. And somebody asked her about the Copa. She described the wallpaper on the Copa. She described how it was laid out. And she described where the cash register was that had a bullet hole in it. I mean, I sat there and I went, are you kidding me? I mean, I think that her knowledge and her I think I missed that. Her health was not the best. She smoked for God knows how many years. Her lungs were not great. And she had health problems. But the minute that I told her that we were going to do this, documentary, it was, okay, I'm working. Okay. And Jason would go over to the house and just sit there and talk to her, not necessarily on, camera, but he just loved her. And he was a kid. Don't ask me why I picked him. I still, to this day, something told me. I said, how is a kid? He was 33 years old. I said, he could be my son. I don't know why. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I let a 33-year-old kid put a 90-year career on film? And he did it, and he did it beautifully. And he was smart enough, as we got into the research, he originally started to shoot it digitally. And then when we found all her home movies, she used to take home movies, the 8mm camera. And every time she'd play Vegas, she'd have somebody drive her down the strip and she would run the 8mm. So there would be one hotel in Desert. And then maybe some motel in Desert. And these films are like gold right now. These Vegas films. Because nobody has these. She also took home movies of the Dick Van Dyke Show. She'd be on the set. So it was the first time that anybody would see them in color. Because Dick Van Dyke Show was never shot in color. So we have those home movies. And she and my father loved to play with the camera. They really did. And of course, Jason found all this stuff and we had it transferred and it was just, oh my God, it was just, but if you watch that documentary, you will see something that's really special. The only thing that I asked in the documentary, one was a solo of my father that actually Jerry Lewis found. And I said, I want the solo of my father in the film. I said, the only other thing I want is, I said, I want it known the same as it is now. And I said, after 1968, my mother hasn't made $1 off of Dick Van Dyke. Not $1. And because everybody said, oh, but the show's running forever. You guys got to be rolling in it. Well, no, she became a single mother and she kept working because she had to support her house. She had to support me. And so she kept working. But every time we screened that film in a theater, and Peter Marshall, who narrates the film, Peter says, after 1968, she never made $1 off of the Dick Van Dyke Show. The audience would gasp every single solitary time. I don't think I stood in the back of the theater where they all didn't go, oh! I mean, I'm serious. and it's absolutely true. So she kept working. She did sitcoms. Her resume goes on for pages. And just so that you know, I got a residual last week for a show that she did called Alf. I don't know if anybody remembers that show.
Sure we do.
Okay. So it was Alf, and I opened it up. That was it. 38 cents.
I want to jump in here real quick and say something because I've had a couple people who have older Hollywood connections. One of them is Pat Kelly, Gene's wife. And, Gene, if she wants to make money, she has to go to the studio and make an agreement with them that she wants to use Gene's likeness because they own more of Gene than she does, and there's no residual money, and so that whole thing, you're totally right. Like this fight right now with the writers and it's a real thing trying to protect that money because it does tend to go towards the studios, the producers, that kind of thing. So it's a real thing. And so you think about Gene Kelly, one of the biggest, you can't be bigger than Gene Kelly. And there's very little money, if any, that comes in. Anytime you see a product, it's not Pat that gets it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, one of the times when we were filming, because, we really made the movie on a wing and a prayer. And we were shooting in her house, and the mail came and I went and got the mail. And Jason said to me, oh, the mail's here. I said, yeah, okay. And I went and got the mail and I said, oh, good, a residual. And Jason said, can I see it? I said, be my guest, my friend. So I went over and I said, open it up. And I had him open it up. I said, how much is it? He said, 1 cent. I said, cost him more to mail it. And he said, "Can I have this? I want to frame it and put it in my office." I said, "It's yours, my friend." I said, "You can have that." It was 1 cent. I said, so the whole residual scale back then is a little bit different. Nowadays, especially like shows like Friends, Cheers, and all those kinds of shows have a much better residual type scale. But back in, and truly the only Mary didn't make any money off of Dick Van Dyke Show after 68. Maury didn't make any money. Larry Matthews didn't make any money. Richard Deacon didn't make any money. The only people that made money off the show were the 4 that owned it. So that's it. And people, it was amazing because the show ran so, as we're sitting here, it's probably running somewhere. And they all thought, "Whoa, you got to be a gazillionaire." Well, no, no, it didn't work that way. So, I hope that the writers and everybody get world out there between streaming and YouTube and all that's basically going on. And it's only fair, it's only fair. And I see the residuals that the Friends gets, and they don't have to work another day the rest of their lives. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much they can make on that show. And
and good for them.
Bravo. I mean, bravo. It worked. And I think it started with Cheers when Ted Danson started to change things, because it had to be changed, because all of those shows in the past weren't nothing. I mean, they would make a couple of $100 a week, and that was it. So it was tough.
Yeah. Chuck Lorre is not broke. Never gonna be broke.
No, I don't think he'll be broke.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to take any more of your time. This has been fantastic. I love it. Everybody just
thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah. Go watch this. Go watch the show. Get the CD right here. Here's the link. Here is the documentary link, free on Amazon right now. Anything in closing at all, Noopy? And thanks again for coming on the show.
I just have to say that personally, I grew up in a wonderful era. I think I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for her fans that continue to support her. I mean, I have learned a lot over these years about fans. I was never one to say anything about a fan, quote unquote, a fan. But I have learned about the loyalty and how they care about a certain individual, and her fans are extremely loyal. And that's very gratifying. And truly, that's the only reason that we did this. I mean, this is not something I'm going to run to the bank, but we really did it for the fans. I'm so proud of that documentary. I have friends that have watched it 12 and 13 times. And I said, "How can you watch that thing 12 and 13 times?" And they said, "Every time I watch it, I find something different. Every time." And a credit to Jason Wise and his wife, because it's not a documentary that says, "And then I did this, and then I did that, and then I went here, and then I went there." There's a love story in there and it's a wonderful documentary, and I encourage everybody to watch it. And I encourage, if you want to hear some downright good singing, then get this CD. trust me, you will enjoy it. You really will.
All right, stand by. I'll say goodbye to you in a second here. Let me run the credits.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.